Welcome to Pulp, the search for lost science fiction classic.
That'll do, pig. That'll do.
That intro doesn't make any sense.
What are you, new around here? Actually, some of you may be new around here. If you are, welcome. My name's Jake. Don't worry, we'll get to the book review here in just a moment, and that intro will make sense. I mean, usually they make sense at it'll all make sense here typically. Typically they do. Okay, often they make sense. Sometimes they'll make sense. All right. Fine. Occasionally they'll make sense. Rarely they... Oh, enough of that. Let's talk about the author. William Hope Hodgson was an English author born November 15th, 1877. One of 12 children born into a poor family, Hodgson was a small boy with something to prove. At 13, he ran away to become a sailor, but was caught and returned. Undeterred, Hodgson became a cabin boy the very next year. He sailed for the remainder of his teen years, and it was around this time that Hodgson developed his strength and combat training system. You see, he was mercilessly bullied at sea, and Sam Moskowitz later wrote of Hodgson, primary motivation of his body development was not health, but self-defense. His relatively short height and sensitive, almost beautiful face made him an irresistible target for bullying seamen. When they moved in to pulverize him, they would learn too late that they had come to grips with easily one of the most powerful men, pound for pound, in all of England. That's actually pretty cool. But in classic, be careful what you wish for fashion, Hodgson hated the sea. The ocean terrified him, and this fear was to be the greatest influence in his writing career. Despite those fears, Hodgson was a brave, remarkable man. He was awarded the Royal Humane Society Medal for heroism for rescuing a sailor that fell from the topmast into shark-infested waters. After his time as a sailor, he began writing poetry, essays on sailor life, and articles on physical health. However, the market for such topics was small, and Hodgson had his light bulb moment while reading Edgar Allan Poe, Arthur Conan Doyle, Jules Verne, and H.G. Wells. He could have a career in fiction. His first short story was accepted in the Royal Magazine in April 1904, and he continued to write short stories, poems, and novels for nearly 10 years. Hodgson married and began to settle down when World War I began, and returning to England to join the Royal Artillery wasn't even a question. An injury forced a mandatory discharge, and Hodgson returned home and resumed writing. But William Hope Hodgson was never one to back down from a fight. He re-enlisted a year later and achieved the rank of lieutenant. Unfortunately, Hodgson was killed by enemy artillery in 1918. He was only 40 years old. Despite critical acclaim, Hodgson was soon forgotten. But his widow, Bessie Farnworth, was a fellow writer for women's magazines, and she tirelessly worked to keep his stories in print. But then her efforts paid off. Several anthologies of his work were published in the 30s, and his stories enjoyed a resurgence. Many authors around this time praised Hodgson for his creepy style, and many, including Weird Tales contributors and the Lovecraft Circle, cite Hodgson as inspiration. Authors such as Clark Ashton Smith, August Derleth, Fritz Leiber, Gene Wolfe, Greg Bear, Adrian Ross, Olaf Stapleton, and the King of Weird himself, H.P. Lovecraft. The legacy of William Hope Hodgson lives on to this day thanks to authors, editors, critics, and fans of weird SF and SF horror. Altogether, he wrote nearly 100 short stories, numerous poems and essays, and 4 novels. Which brings us to The House on the Borderlands. Imagine a building constructed across an invisible chasm of space-time, fated to witness the very end of the world and waiting with open door for any who dared to enter. That is The House on the Borderland, one of the classics of modern science fiction, as well as horror story of great power and intensity. H.P. Lovecraft wrote of this book, the wanderings of the narrator's spirit through limitless light years of cosmic space and kalpas of eternity, and its witnessing of the solar system's final destruction constitutes something almost unique in standard literature. The House on the Borderlands is an original story first published by Chapman and Hall in 1908. There's no corn in this book. Sorry. I own the 1962 Ace Books edition. It is 159 pages and originally cost 35 cents. The cover is by Ed Emshwiller, and Ed knocks it out of the park. Surreal. Eerie. I saw this on the rack, freshly put out, and it was in my hands before I could blink. Everything here takes place in the story. It is nightmarish, brooding, and yet strangely beautiful. I paid $10 for this, which is a lot more than normally I like paying. I know, I'm a spoiled cheapskate, okay? What I did not know at the time was what a good deal that was, because online regularly this book moves for $30 to $50. The 1946 and 1921 hardcovers land anywhere from $300 to well over $1,000 based upon the condition.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
Image Comics made a graphic novel of this, but even that is crazy expensive. But as for the original 1908 UK first edition, I've been unable to find one. In my research, I was able to find several other first editions of his less desirable novels. Those go for thousands. So if you're over there in the UK, keep your eyes peeled.
You don't just get these. These are not cheap.
Since this book is nearly 120 years old, it's obviously you can read it for free on Project Gutenberg and sites like that, which I do recommend reading it. But if you're like me and you need to own the physical copy, you gotta pay up, sucker. All right, what's good? The story opens with two friends going on a camping trip somewhere in Western Ireland. They pass through this strange, somber village and camp just outside of it. There they spend their days fishing, swimming, hiking, and exploring. But one day our friends decide to follow this river to see where it goes. So they follow along, and then it seems as though the woods is beginning to close in on them. There's a sense of claustrophobia, a sense of foreboding. Eventually it leads them to a great ravine. At the bottom of this ravine, more of a chasm really, is this murky lake with bubbles constantly sputtering in the center of it. Overlooking the ravine is this large rock outcropping, and perched atop it is what looks like the ruins of structure. The men circle the chasm, work their way through a wild maze of what was once a garden, and enter the ruins. Now the ruins, they can clearly see this eons ago, centuries ago, who knows how long, was once a house, and a very large house. They start to sift through the rubble a bit, just looking around, poking around, and one of the men finds a book that, because of where it was shoved under, has been miraculously quite well preserved. Neither man says anything to each other, for an otherworldly sense of dread has settled over them. Only once they are well on their way back to camp do they find the ability to speak. And as silly as it sounds, they are both in 100% agreement. That place back there was evil. Night has fallen by the time they return to camp. But despite their fatigue, neither man is able to sleep. And so by candlelight, they open up this old manuscript, and they find it to be a journal. They begin reading. The nameless recluse moved into this house years ago. The townsfolk warned that the home was evil, that it was marked by an otherworldly malevolence. The man scoffed at their superstition, bought it for cheap, and lived there for many years without incident. Then one night the recluse is sitting there reading, and all of a sudden the candles begin to flicker and change in color. Suddenly a portal opens in front of him, and he finds himself helplessly sucked into it. Planets, stars, solar systems rush past him as he is pulled along as if on a string, as if on a track throughout the universe, unable to move, unable to turn back. He comes to the edge of the universe and is pulled further still into the inky nothingness. It feels as though eons have passed, and this man eventually arrives at what lies on the other side of reality. He enters a plain, flat, level. Jagged mountains encircle him. Initially bare, soon eldritch gods, creatures of myth, and demons fill the mountains, all peering down at what lies in the center. It is a jade structure, a house, an exact mirror image of his own home, though much larger. As he approaches, the man sees movement down below. There appears to be a monster trying to get into the house. This monster wrenches at the door, it claws at the jade windows.
Let me in! Let me in!
This large beast is humanoid, though pale in that of a corpse, with long claws and a swine-like head. As the man approaches, still helplessly pulled along on this track, the beast turns and sees him and starts for him. The man is terrified, but unable to do anything as he is helplessly pulled towards this monster. He gets to the point where he can see the terrible fangs in this swine beast. He can feel its insatiable hunger. And then at the last moment, the man is pulled away and cast back into the dark. But then the man comes to, back in his home, sitting in his chair as though nothing had happened. He's disturbed, but relieved. Was this a dream, a hallucination? How very strange, but a relief. Then he checks his clock, and to his shock, he realizes that he has been unconscious for nearly 24 hours. But this was only the start of the terror that was to beset him. That is the first 30 pages, and I was hooked. I'm telling you guys, if you would have told me, hey, this is a long-lost H.P. Lovecraft that you haven't read yet, I would have believed you. Similar prose, yeah, but it's more than that. It's the feel of this. Last year I had reread Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft for the Elusive Exclusive Book Society, and I was getting a very similar, creepy, gothic, eerie, small-town, soaked, occultish, cosmic horror vibe. This is what I wanted to read for SF Horror Month, not the silly giant red birds. The swine things. It's often said that what is unseen is far scarier than what we do see. As an example, Jaws wouldn't nearly have the cultural effect it had if Bruce the Shark was working more than 15% of the time. Spielberg realized that having the danger implied under the water actually increased the horror and made this moment possible. This moment wouldn't be scary if we had been seeing this rubber monstrosity flopping around for the last hour.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
We see the pig monsters early on. That being said, these were scary. I don't want to highlight some of the scares as they should be experienced, but these things are delightfully unsettling. After the initial dream, hallucination, trip, things escalate. The house is soon besieged by these swine things. Half of this book is a home invasion / home defense horror, and it's incredible. These monsters are strong and intelligent, but the house was built like a castle. Even still, the recluse needs to use all his cunning and intelligence to set traps, fortify, and fight off these attacks. But perhaps what is more dangerous is the threat from within.
Here's Johnny.
You guys, this part was so good. I was reading this on the edge of my seat with a dopey grin on my face, in complete disbelief that this came out in 1908. Hodgson was a good writer. Lovecraft kind of poked at his prose a bit, but I do find myself often not agreeing with all of Howie's opinions. Hodgson was a solid visual writer, and you will not have any trouble visualizing this terrifying world. But he also excelled at engaging all of your senses. Like, look here, for instance. Out in the gardens rose a continuous sound. It might have been mistaken by a casual listener for the grunting and squealing of a herd of pigs. But as I stood there, it came to me that there was a sense and meaning to all those swinish noises. Gradually, I seemed able to trace a semblance in it to human speech, glutinous and sticky, as though each articulation was made with difficulty. Glutinous and sticky. Those aren't the first adjectives you reach for, but, instantly you know what that sounds like. Around the halfway point, things change. It seems as though the man is safe for now, and then he says this. One thought there is, in closing, that impresses itself upon me with ever-growing insistence. It is that I live in a very strange house, a very awful house, and I have begun to wonder whether I am doing wisely in staying here. Yet, if I left, where could I go and still obtain the solitude and the sense of her presence that alone makes my old life bearable? What is he talking about? Who is he talking about? Who is this she? Aside from the recluse's sister who acts as his housekeeper, there's been no woman. At this point, the man reading the journal comments with his own notes, essentially saying, "We have no idea what he's talking about." Now, the story was so engaging up to this point that I had all but forgotten that two friends were reading this by candlelight in a tent. From here on out, the narration became less clear, less reliable, with pages missing and even further confusion. Some critics have criticized these decisions, calling them clunky and awkward. I see their point, but I don't know if I agree. Like, sure, Hodgson could have tweaked this a bit to made it more seamless and streamlined the story a bit, but I thought that the abruptness of it and the sudden jarring was actually beneficial to the change in tone and for the ramping up of the weirdness that was to come. Neil Barron once called this book an imaginative tour de force whose power transcends its patchwork construction. The cosmic vision sequence makes it equally interesting as a scientific romance, but it definitely strikes what admirer H.P. Lovecraft sought to define as the true note of cosmic horror. The secrets of the ravine, where these swine beasts are swarming from. The recluse goes down and discovers, well, I won't say. I won't spoil it. All I will say is that there is a cave, and in this cave there is a pit, and above this pit, he sees the foundation of his home. Now, again, on the underside of his home, he sees a cellar door. Now, this cellar door he had seen earlier while he was shoring up his home to defend it against these monsters. He did open it at one point. I won't say what he saw or heard, but it was quickly shut and barricaded. Cosmic horror. Who doesn't love a Monster of the Week story? They're great, they're fun, but cosmic horror, evil so great and vast that it's truly alien, it's my favorite. I can't get enough of it. Obviously, we have the swine creatures, but there are much more here. And in fact, here's a small taste. With the darkness came an intolerable feeling of loneliness and dread. For the first time, I thought of the pit and its inmates. After that, there rose in my memory the still and more terrible thing that had haunted the shores of the Sea of Sleep that lurked in the shadows of this old building. How cool is that? Cosmic horror is xenophobia. It's the fear of the unknown, fear of things unspeakable, of things unknowable. If you enjoy cosmic horror, you would love this. The ending. Again, not spoiling anything. But one massive criticism I have, which I'll get to here in a minute, it was causing me to lose faith in Hodgson's ability to keep a good pace, not lose the reader, and essentially land this thing. Now, he did manage to get back on track, and this led to a satisfying ending, so good on him. The main reason that I love this subgenre of speculative fiction is because it inspires creativity. Sure, we've all read dozens, maybe even hundreds of stories that are good, but we read them, we kind of digest them, and we move on without any lasting impact. But then we read something that moves us to create, something that sparks imagination, something that highlights and shines a light into a formerly dark recess of our imagination where we see ideas and plots and threads of imagination, things that we didn't even know were there. I finished this book, closed it, and instead of going over my notes, beginning to research, working on a script like I normally do, I had the impetus to write, to create vast universes of my own, of things unknown, never before seen. This is what I value most in a story: inspiration. And William Hope Hodgson delivers inspiration by the bucketful. And now, the bad. If you're not used to reading stuff this old, the prose, the speech might take a minute or two to get used to. That's not a problem for me. I don't mind that. What was a problem for me was a good idea that several of the critics of this book, or the people that have praised it, that I've read, really enjoyed. I did not as much. Like I said, the idea was good, but I think it was paced abysmally. Is that even a word? Abysmally? Well, even if it's a word or not, it was paced abysmally. That's definitely a word. I've heard that word. Gotta look it up. The recluse suffers another vision or astral journey or whatever, but this time, instead of being pulled along, he is stationary, seated in his house. And what follows is the decay of the universe as he reaches the end of time. Now, that's a cool idea, and some cool things do happen. That being said, this very nearly derailed the entire book. As you guys may know, I don't skim read. I don't skim at all when I read. Some of you do, and if that's the case, that's fine. There's no judgment. But
is that cheating?
Personally, I can't do it. I have too much respect for the art, the craft of writing. I have too much respect for authors who put their time into crafting the perfect word. I mean, I can't do it. I don't even skim. I don't skim for authors who don't even deserve it. Like, there's some authors that just, I care more about their writing than they do. That's what I'm finding out here. Anyway, I can't skim. It's just a personal conviction. I feel like it's disrespectful. I also feel like it'd be treating you with disdain if I was to skim. Like, how could I accurately review something if I didn't actually read all of it? I'd figure, like, maybe is there something I'm missing because I haven't gotten the full story? Anyway, that's just me, personal conviction, whatever. As a result, I read every word, and if I read something and I don't understand it, I will go back and reread it. I want to make sure that the misunderstanding is the author being obtuse and not me just not catching it. Again, just my personal conviction. However, this does make difficult portions of story even more difficult.
What are you saying, Jake? You're just rambling.
Okay. Here's what I'm saying. At page 87, we enter this dream-like sequence. Surreal events start happening. Okay, I have no issue with any of the things that happen. Some of them are quite cool. What I have issue with is how long they happen. The sequence ends at page 137. That is 50 pages of dreamlike exposition. That is far too long. If you are not like me and you are able to skim. What's fun? Well, obviously not pages 87 to 137, but up until this point, this book was a fast-paced blast. The pig monsters I thought would be silly or maybe corny or dated. They weren't. They're creepy. They're cool. Yeah, 2/3 of this book you will not be able to put down. So what's the verdict? Museum. What's more to say about this that hasn't been said already? So I'll turn it over to Terry Pratchett, who once called this book The Big Bang in my private universe as a science fiction and fantasy reader and later writer. Even with the massive lull of a third act, I don't see myself not recommending this book to any lover of paranormal, eerie, or weird SF horror. And that is my review of The House on the Borderlands. Have you read this? Or maybe is there any other cosmic horror that you feel is flying under the radar that we need to know about? Let us know in the comments. You guys, 2 museum-ranked novels back to back? That is unheard of, considering last year we only got 2 total. Although we probably should have like 5 last year. Anyway, insanity. The question is, do you think we can get to 3 in a row? Is that even possible? What do you guys think? Guys, where'd everybody go?